Hello, everyone. Welcome to adding Propound API to your toolkit. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to get started here in just a sec. In today's webinar, we're going to have just a quick discussion of what this webinar is and what it's about. And then I want to take some time to talk about customer successes we've had with the Propound API product and a quick overview of the product itself. And then we'll actually dive into the product. I want to show you a little bit about what Propound API can do, how it can be useful to you and to your clients and customers. And then we can talk about how we can help you to talk about Propound API with those that you may come in contact with in the IBMI community. So my name is Brian May. I am the VP of Product Management here at Profound Logic. Most of you that are attending this webinar, actually, I know personally. This was a very limited event. Invitations were only sent out to influencers in the IBMI community, so that means you. We wanted to have a small event where we can talk about the Profound API product to those that in the IBMI community that others look to for advice. The idea here being to make sure that, not that we want you to go out and sell our products, but to make sure that you're aware of the API products and services that we have available so that when people do ask questions, you have answers. So again, thank you for attending and we'll jump right in. So Profound API. Yes, I am the VP of Product Management here. I'm also the product owner for Profound API, our API product. So if I seem like this product is important to me, that it's my baby, it's because it is. So the whole idea behind Profound API was to make API development simple for the IBMI community. We designed it from the ground up with the thought of making a complex subject simple. So what we've done is we've built a product that takes away all the complexity that we possibly can and allows customers to deliver APIs quickly and with very little effort and with very little new skills needing to be learned. I always like to throw in a quote from one of our customers. So here's one from Trevor McCullough from Camic. He's a great guy, but I think this sums it up really well. So thanks to Profound API, our applications are now incredibly seamless, flexible, and dynamic. I'll take that as high praise. And of course, it's always important to improve the perception of the IBMI platform in a company. So that is our goal here, is to make the IBMI an equal player in the enterprise and to do it in a way that makes it simple. So let's start out talking about a customer success story. As with many customers, we're not going to be using names here, but this is a large banking customer that we've done work with around their API solutions. And what we were able to do with Profound API is help them to deliver APIs quickly, which allowed them to deliver new technology, new functionality in a timely manner and actually outpace their competition. So before using Profound API, this particular bank was having to go to their software vendor for new APIs that they needed for the package that they were using. And that process between requesting the enhancement, approval, development time, testing, all of those things were taking them up to 8 weeks to get a single API created so that they could deliver new functionality. After Profound API was brought into the mix, they were able to bring that down. In some cases, able to roll out entirely new API interfaces in as little as 45 minutes. When we get into the demo section, you'll see how easy it can be to take data that is on your IBMI and expose that as an API, really with just a few clicks of the mouse. So this particular customer was able to get incredible value from a tool like Profound API that allowed them to do this development themselves and to do it quickly. That same customer, being a large bank, is obviously doing a lot of transactions. And on IBMI, running Profound API, they were able to achieve over 2,000 transactions per second. Now, of course, they are running a very large IBMI. I would not expect this, I would not expect to get 2,000 transactions per second on something that's, at a PO5 software tier, right? With just a couple of gigs of RAM on it. But the throughput is there. The technology is there. Profound API is built on top of Node.js and Express, which are the technologies that many services use for their API solutions. So we were able to take that power and bring it to IBMI and create an environment where not only can our customers create APIs in a very simple and quick fashion, they can also handle workloads that as their API use increases. And this particular customer was able to tell us that they actually had an increase in revenue potential of 23% because they were able to, again, deliver that new functionality quickly, and in many cases beat the rest of the market to potential opportunities because of their quick turnaround on their development side. So Profound API, let's talk about what it is. The idea behind Profound API is to simplify integration. It's APIs made simple. So how do we make APIs simple? Well, API, building an API architecture can be very complex. There's lots of moving parts to think about. But when we built Profound API, we built it from the ground up to be a single holistic solution that handles all of those complexities for you. So when it comes time to do the development of your API and the actual functionality of it, we have a very easy to use and flexible low code environment that allows you to just answer questions about what it is you want your API to do and not have to get into the details of writing code. A big barrier for a lot of IBMI shops that want to move into APIs, specifically in Node.js, is they have to become Node.js developers. And in our environment, you don't. You can use the low code system. You're not locked into the low code system. If you want to do more, you can write your own Node.js code, but it's not a requirement. Unlike many API solutions out there, Profound API was built for the IBMI from the ground up. We are an IBMI company. We have been in the IBMI industry since 1999, and we built this not just to work with IBMI, we built this for IBMI. Though we built it for IBMI, Profound API is not limited to IBMI. What do I mean by that? I mean that Profound API can access everything that we need from our IBMI, but it can also access other things. It can call external APIs to bundle those into your own APIs. It can also work with other databases other than DB2. Let's face it, shops these days have more than one system in their enterprise. They have more than one platform, more than one database, and Profound API can access them all. If you have data in a Microsoft SQL Server or in Oracle or in a MariaDB server, all of those things, you can just reach out and pull that data into your APIs alongside your IBMI resources and have one universal interface to all of those things. Deployment is simple and flexible because Profound API runs natively on IBMI, but because it's Node.js based, it can also run on Linux or Windows. You can run it on your local computer to do your development. If your IBMI happens to be very heavily used and you don't have the free resources to run an API server on your IBMI, that's fine. You can run it on a Linux partition or on Windows. Maybe your power system, you've maxed out your IBMI licenses and you're using all of your resources available there, but maybe you have some unused resources and you want to carve out a Linux partition. You can do that, or you can run it in the cloud. It can be run anywhere, which makes the deployment very flexible, but because it's just a Node.js application, it's also very simple. I already mentioned many different database options for Profound API. You can currently communicate with DB2, MySQL, MariaDB, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle. If there are other databases that people need, all they have to do is ask. We can always add database support to the product, but these are the databases that our customers need. From a security standpoint, Profound API already has authentication and authorization built in. You can authenticate using IBMI credentials if you want. You can also use things like API tokens or even OAuth to identify yourself as a valid user to the API system. And then within the API system, once you are authenticated, there is a role-based authorization system where you can control who can access what APIs, all the way down to individual API route levels. Profound API is built on top of the Open API standard. This was previously known as Swagger. So if you're not familiar with the term Open API, Swagger you probably are. And Profound API has that support built in. So as you build your APIs, Open API documents, Swagger documents are automatically built, and an automatic documentation system is built as you're developing. We'll take a look at that when we dive into the product in a minute. Again, it also has the tools in there to help you monitor the server. So we have a performance dashboard that can show you what's going on at any given moment within your API server. This is extremely important, especially for IBMI shops who are not used to running an API workload and managing those types of things. This gives them an easy place to just go and have a quick look at what's going on with API server and see how healthy it is. And so why did we build this API solution, and why did we try to make sure that we covered all the bases? Again, we wanted to make this simple and make it accessible to the IBMI community, because APIs are the key to modern integration. IBMI has a reputation historically of being difficult to integrate with, but that just doesn't have to be the case. With Profound API, you can have these API interfaces and create APIs to be consumed, and also consume external APIs in a very simplified fashion so that IBMI becomes an equal player to all the other platforms that you may be using. So let's talk a little bit about use cases, because this is the key for you as an influencer, as you're talking to people, as people are asking you questions, as you are working with your clients, if you're in a consulting role. These are the types of topics that come up where Profound API can be extremely helpful. So how do you integrate? What are the ways where you may want to use APIs in a normal IBMI shop's day-to-day? A big one that I hear from a lot of customers about is EDI replacement. More and more vendors and partners are slowly moving away from EDI, and they're wanting to implement API interfaces for business-to-business data exchange. That is the trend. EDI is not going away tomorrow, so trust me, it's going to be a slow process, but the process has begun. More and more companies are realizing that there's some data that they'd like to have in a more timely manner. Most EDI processing, as you know, is often done in large batches at night or on a scheduled basis. And having instant access to information is very appealing and brings a lot of business value to a lot of partnerships. Augmenting your EDI strategy with APIs is a very popular option right now. Of course, there's always new development. As you're building new applications using whatever front end, lots of customers are starting to think about using APIs for controlled access to their data. Historically, when we're integrating with our own applications, we would just create ODBC or JDBC connections to our data to be used by these other software packages. And that does work. However, that can be a bit of a security risk. In order to give those applications access to the data, you've got to create a system profile for the database so that they can authenticate, and then once you've done that, if it is a system profile, it can be used to log on to the system unless you've done a really good job of securing everything. API integration does not have that risk. Your authentication for your APIs does not have to be tied to your IBMI system authentication. You can use things like OAuth or API tokens, or even if you want to use credentials, usernames and passwords, they don't have to be tied to system profiles. Again, we can give access to that data in a controlled environment through an API that controls what can be seen and what can't, and also using an authentication method that doesn't allow a third party to access our system in ways we didn't intend. Lots of customers are looking to get away from large imports and exports of data using things like FTP, SFTP, FTPS, whichever flavor you want to talk about. But what we're really talking about here are large batches of data being transferred back and forth, imported and exported from our systems. Doing this can actually have its own side effects that you need to think about. Things like data duplication, right? You're now storing that data in more than one place, which means you're paying for storage for the same data over and over again. But also it introduced data latency because, when we're talking about these large transfers, you're not continuously doing those throughout the day. Those are usually on scheduled basis. So as soon as you send that data, it's out of date until the next time you send the data. So having real-time access via API is something that's extremely attractive for a lot of our customers. And then what's everyone talking about? AI. In fact, our last webinar was about using Profound API to enable AI in your business applications. So as the use of AI grows, as these new AI tools come into use and throughout the business, throughout day-to-day work within your business, you're going to need APIs to allow the AI to interact with your data and your processes on your IBMI. So with all that, let's go ahead and jump in. I'd like to really show you the product because I think that the simplicity of using Profound API kind of speaks for itself. So with that, let me go ahead and flip over, and I'm going to pull up our development environment here. Everything is browser-based, so there's nothing that you have to install on a developer's machine. We can come here and we can just start working on our API. So let's start with a very simple use case. Let's talk database. So we mentioned earlier that one particular use case is to eliminate direct database access. So how would you do that? It's actually very simple. I can come here to my database tab within the IDE, and you can see here I've got an IBMI configured. I've got an MariaDB instance and an Aurora instance and AWS configured. I have a Microsoft SQL Server and Azure. It doesn't matter where the database is, we can connect to it. But just for simplicity, I'm running on IBMI. Let's just stick to my IBMI. And I'm just gonna expand out here and we can see all the tables that I have within the library demo lib on my IBMI. So let's just choose a table. For this, let's go with the customers table. So if I expand that out, I can see the columns in that table. I can see the key for that table. And let's just say, okay, I need to make the data in this table available via API. How do I do that? All I need to do is right click on that table and choose build an API. And it will go out, retrieve all the information about that table and build out the logic and the interface for our API for us automatically. So you can see here on the right, I have my API routes. These are all the individual routes that can be called within this API. So I have a /customers, which is to retrieve a list of customers. I have a /customer number, which is to retrieve a specific customer. /customers with a put instead of a get allows me to, of course, add one. Update would be customers /customer number with a post, and then delete would be the delete HTTP method with customers and a customer number. So it's built these routes for me automatically. And you can see here, I have within my canvas here, these are my low code steps in order to process this particular, this API. Here at the bottom, we have our input parameters and our output parameters. So let's start with a simple one, the get customers with customer number. If we look here, I have a single input parameter called customer number that is part of the path. You can see here, if I open this up, you can see I have all the data types available to me that I would need. This particular API comes from the path, so it's not changeable. I can add an example of what one might look like. So let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can add a description to say exactly what this is. So customer number to be retrieved. Now, why do we need these descriptions and examples? It's because we are building the open API documents as we're developing this API. So again, and those things are available over here as well at the API route level. And then for our output parameters, you can see here, it's passing back an object called data with all of the rows from our, all the columns from our table here. And that we're passing this back when we have an HTTP status code of 200, which means everything went well. If we wanted to have other HTTP statuses, we can add those here, where we can do any HTTP status we want, and those can have completely different sets of output parameters. So we have these APIs. I'm not going to make any major changes to this thing. I'm just going to save it. So let's do a save as. And for this one, we're going to put this one in Profound API examples. Nope. Yes. There we go. And our file name, customers.api.json. So now this API is saved. Actually, for the development server that I'm working on right now, this API is deployed. It can actually be called right now. I can go here within my IDE and I can go to my test tab and we can actually do a test with this. Or maybe we can't. Did I make a mistake? Let's see. Anytime we do a live demo, that's always a possibility. Yes, I made a mistake. So let me delete this one. There we go. And let's get a quick refresh. And examples, customers. It's my test tab. Yeah, there we go. So now I can go to my test tab and we can choose any one of these routes up top. Let's use the get one option here. You can see it allows me to drop in a customer number. Actually, I'll run the list first because I don't remember the data in here. So I can leave all of these at their defaults and just execute, and it will give me a list of all of the customers in the table. So it looks like I have a customer 103, customer 112, customer 114. So let's go to this one and we'll just run this for 114. There we are. Execute. And here is the data that came back. So we have that data object with our customer data all right here within our JSON response. If I weren't talking and didn't go in and add some descriptions and things like that, I could have done this. I could have taken this table and API enabled it in what, 3 clicks, 30 seconds or so. But the idea here is that we made it simple. We've handled all the plumbing to make the API server work. And we have our low-code system and the wizard to help us to build this API so that we can just do this quickly. Our customers have very specific needs to do certain things, and we've tried to make those things as easy to do as possible. So that's a quick run through of creating a simple table-based data API. But what if we wanted to do something a little different? What if we needed to actually call an RPG program? I actually have an example already built for that, so we can pull that up. So you can see here in my low code, I have 2 steps. I have one that calls an IBMI program and one that sets the API output. I'm accepting the claim ID. This is based on an insurance claim application that this example is. So I'm pulling in my claim number, my claim ID here as part of my HTTP path. And for the output, I'm echoing back the ID, the date of the claim, the county of the claim, and a description. If we take a look here, I'm going to open up this low code step. And this is how the low code system works. So if I were, as you can see here, I just have questions to answer. So what would I like to do? I'd like to call an IBMI program. There are a list of all kinds of things that we can do as low code steps. This particular one we're calling a program. And what IBMI program do we want to call? Return claim R2 in the demo library. You do not have to hard code your libraries. However, I demo on a somewhat development-based system, so I hard code that just so that things don't go awry in the middle of a demo, because someone else is on the box playing with library lists, etc., and unexpectedly cause problems. So we have that, and then we basically have our parameter definition. So here we can see that, we have a data type of packed decimal for the first parameter for this program. We take a look, all of the RPG data types are here so that we can use any of them, including data structures and arrays and all of those things. So this is a packed 9 and 0 packed decimal, and we're gonna pass in the claim ID we got on input. And then we're returning 3 parameters here. So you can see we have character 25, character 10, and character 20. So we just define what our parameter list is for our program, and then we can call it. You also notice this button, extract parameters from RPG code. We click this. I can actually copy the prototype from my RPG program into this window and send it, and it will actually take that and form these parameters for me. So this is especially useful when you have a program that has a really complex parameter list. Maybe you've got some complex data structures that have data structures embedded inside of data structures and arrays and all of those things. Or maybe it's just a simple list of parameters, but there's 100 of them. Being able to just copy that in straight from your RPG code into that window and click a button does make setting up the parameter list much easier. So then we have that. If we want to see the JavaScript, the Node.js code for any step within the low-code system, we can always click this button, and it will show us exactly the code that's being used. And we can modify this code if we want to do something custom. That's not necessary for what we're doing right now, so we won't do that. And then we have an option here where I'm just setting the API output. So what HTTP status do I want to send back, especially if I have multiple that are defined, and then what to put in the parameters here. Some of those I set directly in the IBMI program call, and the others I'm just doing here in this separate step. So with this, we can take a look. Let's just save it, since it's, again, we can come here to our test tab and we can execute this, and that will call our RPG program and retrieve our data right here, and we have our response. Over here in the test tab, you'll also notice that we have a curl command. So if you have automated testing, you can copy this curl command directly into your testing suite to be called multiple times or into an automated test for when you are putting this in production in the future. Also, just a plain URL. So if you don't want to use the test tab here, you just like to open this in a tab in your browser, you can absolutely do that. And of course, there is the response from our API. And take the pretty print option there here in Chrome, and you can see the JSON formatted a little easier to read. So we've seen database access. We've seen calling an RPG program. I also have one that does a little of everything. So here's an example API that I have where I'm calling an IBMI program, that same IBMI program we just called, but I'm also going to retrieve some data from my MariaDB instance in AWS. So for that, I would just use retrieve set of database records as my low-code step, point it to the database that I want to use. In this case, I'm using my MariaDB in AWS. What table do we want to use? What columns are we looking for? Selection criteria, etc. Basically, setting up our SQL to retrieve the data. We are using parameter markers here. Again, we want to protect against SQL injection. That is a thing for APIs as well as it's not just a front end UI thing. So we have to protect against that. And of course, we have all these different options here about what we want to do. So I can call my IBMI program. I can retrieve some data from the cloud. And I can also retrieve some local DB2 data here from a different table. And we're going to put all of that within a single API, a single API on my IBMI. And so let's flip over to our test and run that. And you'll see here, very quickly, we got a response and we got all the data from all the different places into our JSON response. So again, the important thing to remember here is Profound API is built for IBMI, but it's not just IBMI resources available within your APIs. It can reach out and talk to anything you have in your enterprise. We can also do the reverse, which I think is another really cool functionality here. So I'm going to open my module here. So a module within Profound API or from Profound.js, a module is think of it like a service program on IBMI. It is a module with routines that can be called by other things. So we can create these routines and they can be called from APIs, they can be called from Node.js applications. They can also be called from our RPG programs, which is what we're going to take a look at here. So this first example I have here is called Get Customer Info. And you can see here it's actually going out to our database running in AWS and retrieving some customer information. And then returning that the output. So the input parameter is a customer ID, and then the output is giving the name, address, city, state, and zip that it's retrieving from that external database. And you'll notice this third tab, IBMI call interface. So not only can you define the input and the output and have the logic to retrieve the external data, we can also, it also gives us the actual RPG code we need to call this Node.js, which really this low code is a Node.js routine. So this is the RPG code we need to call this routine within the Profound API server. And this works even if the Profound API server is not running on IBMI. This Profound API server could be running on a Linux box, it could be running in the cloud, it doesn't matter. When we set this up, there is a connection that is configured between the IBMI and wherever the Profound API server is running. If it's on IBMI, obviously that's local host is the connection, but if it's somewhere else, that's okay. And so we could use this RPG code that we have right here. We give the prototype, obviously, and we'll have a data structure for the input and a data structure for the output. And we even give you the call statement and pre-fill it with everything that you need. So to use this, you can copy this into an RPG program, and all you really have to do is make sure that you populate the input data structure before you make the call, and then after the call, you can use all of the data that's in the output data structure. It's very simple, just like calling any program. So let's see that live. So I actually have that set up. So we have, like I said, this is talking to our AWS database. So let me flip over here to my green screen session. You can even do this in the green screen. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to pull up my customer inquiry program. And so this is that program. And let's look up customer ID number 4. I don't know. There we go. So in this green screen program, I said, okay, this is the customer I want. And it actually called our Profound API routine, which then queried our external database and got the data for us and then returned it back to our RPG program. What's the code for that look like? It looks like this. So 90% of what you see on this screen is copied directly from the IDE in that example. The only thing I had to add was, of course, my green screen display file. I have, my control here for, looking for my exit key and my execute format, and then I load from my screen into my input data structure, and then make my call and load what's in my output data structure into the fields on my green screen. That's all this program does. But again, even though it's a green screen application, this green screen application is now talking to a MariaDB database running in the cloud. And we were able to do that. You know, if you sat down to do this, it'd take you a couple of minutes to pull it together and actually implement that. And so now we have that simplified level of integration between our IBMI application and data that we may have somewhere else. The other example I have here is this get city info, and this particular one is taking in a zip code and calling an external web service where it's called Zipopotamus. I use it for examples all the time. Basically, you give it a zip code and it tells you all kinds of different information about that zip code. So it passes back lots of information. So for this, you'll notice that we are just capturing it into a work variable called zip data. And then on our output, we are loading up the city, the state, the latitude, and the longitude from that zip data response. And again, the call interface is pretty much the same. The only thing that's different about the call interface is the input and output data structures, and then the routine that we want to call. But again, from the green screen, once I do these 2 low code steps to call an external API and then load our output parameters, I can come back here and we can call that. And so now I have a green screen for it as well. I'll use the zip code. We'll use the zip code for our home office, which is 45459. And if I do that, you can see here, it's called the external web service API and retrieved the name of the city, which is Dayton, because our home office is in Dayton, Ohio. Again, we can easily make those API calls as well as external database queries all within our low code routines, and then easily integrate those back into our IBMI applications. So that gives us a quick rundown of creating APIs, consuming APIs, consuming external databases, kind of all the functionality that we have as far as the development side of it is concerned. So let's talk about some of the other features that are extremely important here. I mentioned that we have authentication and authorization built in. You see here we have a permissions tab where we can set default access, and we can add roles to allow and deny to control each of these individual routes. So again, we can get as granular as we'd like. We can set up our user authorization for our API users. Again, this is my test, so all I have set up is myself. But we can set up API keys that can be used. We can use credentials. We just, with version 7 of Profound API, we have implemented OAuth 2. So you can use OAuth 2 for your authentication as well. And so that is a new option for you. So all of that's managed right here within the IDE. Very easy to do. We've done all the plumbing for you. But also, I mentioned that the product's built on top of OpenAPI. I mentioned that it builds those Swagger docs for us so that we can share our APIs and easily be consumed by others. It also builds the API Explorer here. So this is your opportunity to come through and be able to look at the definition of any of the APIs that you have available. You can search for these APIs. This is your portal for your API consumers to be able to come and find the APIs that are available and to be able to consume them. So we can get down into all the different APIs that we have available, and even test them right here within the documentation. And then in addition to having this graphical interface for it, we can also see I'll get to a smaller list here. You can see here the link. This is the actual OpenAPI file. So you can, one of your developers that are going to consume your APIs can actually use this URL to go out and import the definitions of your APIs. And depending on what development environment they're working in, a lot of them will actually go ahead and scaffold out the calls for them so that they can cut down on the amount of work they have to do in order to consume your APIs. Again, the idea here is let's face it, developers don't like writing documentation, right? I've been guilty of that myself. So the best way to make sure it happens is the product just does it for them. Now, this documentation is only as good as the information that it's given. So within the IDE, you'll see lots of places where there are places for descriptions and comments. Fill those in, and this will actually be very useful. But at a minimum, you'll get a basic listing of the inputs and the outputs and how to call. So that's better than nothing. The other thing that I want to point out is if we take a look at our API dashboard. So this is the dashboard. And as you can see here, I did not load up a ton of data ahead of time here, but we can see things like the number of requests that our API server has run. Obviously, I started this server fresh before our webinar. How many successful requests, how many errors, CPU usage and memory usage. All of this here is in a nice, easy to read graphical dashboard. Why? Well, because we want to make it easy for you to keep track of these things. Your IBMI admins are probably not used to managing an API server. So this gives them a place to come and be able to see what's happening. If there's a slowdown on the system, if the API server is the new thing that was installed, it's going to get blamed automatically, right? So this gives us the ability to go in and say, oh, well, it's not the API server because it's not using that much memory and it's running fine. But you have lots of tabs in here. We won't go into everything, but we can get into all kinds of information. The important being errors. We can see any errors that have happened. I'm going to force an error just so that we can see what an error looks like. So let's find a good one. And sure, we'll use this one. And I'll just go to my test tab and I'm going to intentionally overflow something. There we go. Perfect. Got an error. So if we come back over to our dashboard now, give it a quick refresh, you can see we have an error, status 500. That program that I called specifically doesn't have error checking in for, an overflow. I leave it that way so that I can do this for demo purposes. But we can take a look at the error. Not only can we see the error, we can actually see the entire request that caused the error, all the information, where it came from, all the parameters, all the headers, everything. So that as a developer, I can take this information and I can go recreate this call in my development environment and figure out what went wrong. So this is all really useful information. We can get into things about like request times, rates and durations, payloads for your network activity. How much data are you sending across your network? All the API calls, even down into very specific. For this particular route, it's been called 5 times. It had 1 error, 4 successes. On average, it's taking 390 milliseconds every time it's called. On average, it's 121 bytes is the payload for what it's sending back. All that information is just right here. So the idea being you don't have to hunt. It's all right here for you to come in and find. So that's a quick look at some of the things that Profound API can do for you and for your customers and clients. So let me come back to our presentation. And the whole point behind this webinar was now you know. That was the goal. Again, I'm not here to ask you to go out and sell our products or to sell Profound API to anyone. My goal here was to reach out to the influencers here in our IBMI industry and say, okay, I just want to tell you what the product does and how it does it, so that you'll keep it in mind. When people are looking for help with APIs or external database access or any of the things that Profound API does, you now know when Profound API is a good fit. So we hope that you will tell those people when they ask, well, take a look at Profound API. Now, maybe you tell them to look at other things too, that's fine. But we want to make sure that everyone's available, because that everyone knows that this product is available, because it is a fairly new product. Also, we're here to help. So if you think Profound API might be a good fit for a situation, but you're not sure, reach out and ask. You can contact me personally anytime, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. Now, for some of you who are in the consulting business or software vendors, etc., if you're looking for a formal partnership, I have to mention that those are certainly available. Just reach out and we can talk about those kinds of things. But with that, thank you for taking your time today to attend our webinar. And again, if I can answer any questions for you, feel free to reach out to me personally at bmay@profoundlogic.com. If you just want more information about Profound API and what it can do, just go out to our website at profoundlogic.com/API. And you can find more information there. We also have a lot of videos on YouTube that were done about Profound API and all of its capabilities. So again, thanks for attending today, and I look forward to seeing all of you around very soon.